All right, guys, I have my Sofia hoodie. I have Max Rosen here with me. Recently topped the HWS tab, and we're gonna talk about that. Obviously, great CV, multiple times going deep into worlds. WSDC finalist as well. Won Cambridge. A bunch of stuff happening. I'm sure that you guys know who Max is. So yeah, as always, please like and subscribe. It helps the channel a lot. And Max, welcome to the podcast. How do you feel?
Thanks for having me.
Um, I guess I always wanted to start with a little bit about the person. That's an interesting question. Let me put it like this: if debating did not exist and we were in a parallel universe where none of this community exists, it's not an option to do it, nothing like this exists, who would Max Rosen be?
God, I'm really afraid I would have ended up doing Model UN or something, which is terrifying. But let's assume that debating and the things that are like it or adjacent to it go away, which is a more interesting question. Yeah, I like writing. At McGill, I've done a lot of work editing for student publications, generally about politics, politics, IR, philosophy, and I think in this world where I had also not developed argumentative and public speaking skills quite as much, I think there's a decent chance I would have tried to be an academic because I am quite interested in political science and political economy. And I dabbled for a while in the idea of doing a master's in political science. So probably more academic. Um, but I think the extracurriculars I would have been doing in university would have been more writing focused.
Okay, so that's an interesting answer. Are you currently do you see yourself as going into academia or not? And if so, how has debating affected that choice?
So I'm going to law school. So I'm studying law at Cambridge beginning in October. And I plan on practicing as a lawyer, specifically litigation, which I think obviously tracks onto debating pretty well. I could see myself being a legal academic. I don't know if political science would be what it is. I'd always want to have some connection to the academy, um, and I think in terms of what I do in debating or just what I read in the everyday, I'm just very interested in these issues. I think when I started debating, like when I was in grade nine, my original advantage was always spec knowledge. Like I was reading, just reading, and that's what probably made me good at debating. Was that I had examples to generate arguments from, and I kind of kept that whole thing going. Um, this whole parallel universe thing. I mean, I was reading The Economist before I started debating, which is a crazy thing to say, but I was. My dad told me there's this magazine that you should read if you're interested in these things, and so he bought me a subscription. I think I must have been 12 or 13.
That's good to hear because later on we're gonna see some of your speeches, and I think we can see some of what you're talking about right now. But before we get into that, so uh, how specifically would you say, apart from the obvious of like exposing you to speaking in front of an audience, has debating affected specifically your choice to go into law school, as your prior education was more focused on politics and you are active on that side? When did that shift happen, and is debating a big part of it, or it's more of a how life happened along the way?
Yeah, I think when I was a kid, I always had some sense that I might be a lawyer, which is, typical if you're a kid who's argumentative and into world issues like that. That's where you're going to get pushed. So I always had some sense. I think what debating did was it A, solidified that, and B, just exposed me to a lot of people who had gone to law school, were thinking about law school. And I think that affected my choice as well about where I went to law school and what kind of law programs I was looking at. Just because I think the biggest thing is that debate exposes you to an international community, which you don't get. I mean, the chances that I, for instance, would have gone to law school in Canada probably would have been somewhat higher if I had not started debating and I was just more in that world. Nothing against law school in Canada. Canada has a great law school. But I do think it's broadened my knowledge of the world and in terms of what I'm actually interested in about law. So public international law, conflict of laws, private international, that's the kind of stuff that I've learned a lot more through debating. And anytime a motion came up that was about extradition or something like that, I was like, damn, this is really cool. So I think that it mostly reinforced things, but the community aspect of it was a big factor too.
Have you met a lot of people that have gone through a change because of them being exposed to debating? And what is it about meeting so many people from international circuit that kind of broadens your horizons? In your case, education-wise, career-wise, but maybe in other cases just the way of thinking, or what do we think about the world, political views? What do you think in terms of how that changes you?
So I think the diversity of people is one of the big things. Just in terms of academic background, what people are studying, what type of program they're at, what age they're at. I think age is actually a pretty big one because you start debating as a novice and you're in your first year, and there just aren't that many opportunities to get to know people with way more life experience, whether that be in university or in career or whatever. So I think in part it's about making connections who are just in very different stages of life. So that's a defense of dinos actually. I think that their purpose in the circuit is sometimes to pass down life knowledge and life experience. Um, is there an adverse selection problem there where dinos don't always make the best choices? Maybe, I don't know, but there's some use to that. And then I think that just the you meet a lot of interesting people, or you hear a lot about a lot of interesting people. I remember being so excited when I was in high school and I would hear like, okay, like, this is what Dan Lahab is actually doing for his career. I was like, damn, like debating can take you places, and there's a funny connections element to it. Like you see all these Americans working at Bridgewater, and the basis of hiring at Bridgewater is, do you debate at an Ivy League school? Oxbridge too. So there's definitely a usefulness to the connections that you make from debating. Um, I don't know. I think the actual discursive act of debating does open your mind in a sense. I think that there's always a risk, and people talk about this, that debaters kind of float above actual disagreement and actual ideology because you become so good at defending both sides that you develop a bit of a blasé attitude to what the truth is, and what you actually value. And one nice thing, at least among a lot of debaters that I've met, is that we talk about politics and ideas a lot outside of debating. Me and Tejas talk about this stuff a lot because he's so interested in like EA and markets and all that kind of stuff. So I think I've just been exposed to a lot of people who I enjoy talking about things with and running ideas by, and setting articles too. So that part is great too.
Is that the main thing that attracts you to debating, the discussion of ideas and the difference of ideas, or is there more?
Well, I think if I were losing all the time, I would enjoy it less. But I actually do think that the act of giving the speech, you sort of know what I mean. Like you're sort of in the zone, and thinking really hard. And it's like riding a bike in one sense, but then it's not, and you have to be really creative and think on the spot. Funnily, so in the HWS round robin finals from last week, I got asked a POI by Ellie Stevenson, which I do think is probably the best POI I've ever heard in a debating round. And I won't, I can't give you all the context because this info slide is way too long. But um, in short, she asked something to the effect of, because we were defending pretty much pure act utilitarianism, and she asked something to the effect of, uh, if I offered the panel to donate $100 to Against Malaria Foundation, would you be morally obligated to award the debate to us if that were the condition? Um, and everyone laughed at that, so I had about 3 seconds to formulate a response while the audience was laughing and I couldn't say anything. I came up with some stupid cop out response, even though I probably in retrospect could have thought of something more creative. Um, but that part is fun too.
So I guess before we dive into the past, it's a good moment to talk about HWS. You did very well at that tournament. It's a special tournament because of the eclipse and because all of the old people going back to HWS. But you're one of the younger generations, especially in that context. So, how was the tournament for you, and what are some of the highlights that you think you will go back to, especially in the future?
Everyone was underestimating the Dinos, and I kept telling people like Brent and Buzz and Debbie and Toby, those are each half Canadian teams. I was like, you guys don't know what's about to hit you with the Canadian Dinos. And Debbie and Toby actually broke. I think they broke 6 or 7 too. And they put up a good fight in the semi too. Like I thought they were very much in the discussion or should have been. And Brent and Buzz just narrowly missed out on the break. I think it's because they lost to Anushka and Max, who Brent had formerly coached, which I'm sure felt great for him. But they were great, and one of the nice things about debating these people. So in our round one, we were extending off Brent and Buzz, and this was a motion about history about Biafra, and I knew sort of just enough from some political science class I took a long time ago. But Brent and Buzz came out on OG, and they just dropped facts, and it was great because it makes the whole debate so much better when you're not calling out false things and you're just debating in the correct plane of reality. And of course, we did this like technical analysis extension off of them, which felt bad because this is like very modern debating meta. But it felt like I was having to do the opposite of what I normally do, which is I'm being confronted with a debate style where I'm like, damn, I would have liked to do that. And then I have to do something else. So that part was really fun. And I actually think, for all the criticism the round robin gets, the environment there is great. And I'll actually say that Danny Schoening is doing an incredible job as the new head of debate at HWS. The tournament was extremely well run. The food much improved, much improved. You wouldn't believe it. Um, and I just think he's running a pretty tight ship. And it was fun that they expanded it and opened it up to a whole bunch of other teams. Um, I thought it just meant more diversity of debate styles. 9 rounds is a lot. I wouldn't necessarily do that again. But I think it just amplified everything else I said about diversity of age, diversity of experience, and the actual quality of the rounds. There were so many rounds I was in at the round robin where I was like, this is definitely one of the best rounds I've been in ever, maybe.
How was debating against the ultimate combination between the old generation and the young generation of Ashish and Tejas?
I have to air
Two
my
of the
dirty laundry
smartest
because
people I know, of course.
yeah. Oh, they were really great. We had a great round against them. We were CG, they were CO. We fairly lost to them by 1 point, which is too bad. Uh, they actually did exactly what people said they would do, which is Ashish ran all this brilliantly phrased smart extension material, and you weren't really sure which of it was going to win the round, but there was just so much out there that it could be massaged into whatever you want it to be. And then Teja stood up and gave about 7 minutes of direct ref. Pretty much nothing else other than direct ref because they could specialize like that. And I think I didn't quite expect that to happen, so I was a bit framier and less direct refy than I should have been, which is too bad because that round also broke the tiebreaker on top speaker between me and Tejas because it's head-to-head comp and they beat us by 1 point. So Tejas is the top speaker. I'm the second speaker. It just doesn't show that on the tab.
Fair enough, fair enough. But do you think they would have to change this style, and how would they do in, let's say, current or in the last few iterations of Worlds? Because to be honest, one of the drawbacks of HWS, at least in my view, is unfortunately due to physical constraints, it's hard to get that much of a diverse pool of judges from different circuits, and this is something that Worlds obviously has in comparison. So, do you think something would change there? Would they have to change it up a little bit, or they can go all the way through with this style?
Um, I thought they did just enough for the judging, because they didn't do double panels, so the judges were a bit more consolidated. And I think in every round there was a chair who would come to a similar call that you would see at Worlds. I think that there are always ways that you need to adapt your debating for certain other judges. I think for whatever reason, I've always struggled appealing to judges from the Asian circuit. Just different burdens, different ways of handling closing half, so on. But I think Ashish and Tejas wouldn't have that problem. I think they do just fine at Worlds. I don't think I mean, they would adapt like any good team does. Like the that debate that I don't want to engage in. That's just way too far in the past about old debaters versus new debaters, and like, how would you do if you picked them up and transplanted them? I think just fine, just fine.
So, last question about HWS. You told us a good moment. What was something unexpected for you? You already mentioned that you were expecting some of the dinos who were underappreciated, but what was something that you expected different and you were maybe proven wrong, or you generally was not expecting for it to happen that way?
Well, I didn't think it was impossible, but I'll shout out some fellow Canadians here and say that Anushka and Max Williams, who are both on Team Canada 2023 and debating as a hybrid team. Max goes to U of T, so Hard House, and Anushka goes to Harvard. They broke, they broke, and apparently put up a good fight in the semi. And Anushka's a novice, and Max is in second year and hasn't debated a ton. And it was very nice to see that happening. Nice to see Team Canada alumni doing well, and it was fun to see them beat Brent because I think they enjoyed that a lot.
Yeah, that's a funny story, and we'll have Brent on the podcast sooner or later. Okay, that's a great segue to the first thing that I wanted to show people. So let's get straight into it, and I'm sure that you can tell us more about what I'm about to show. So here it is. It's
Oh
the
no!
online
Oh no!
WSDC Grand Final for 2020. And you're speaking that final for Team Canada. Before I start the speech, would you like to give some context for this round? How are you feeling before
Okay,
it
two
and the
points of
build up?
context. So first, this was 2020 in Canada, and at this point, we're living in an authoritarian communist state where you're banned from getting a haircut because of COVID. And so I had to have, I think it was my friend, or I may have did it myself, but I had to do it myself. So my hair had regrown a little bit in this, but it's the worst haircut I've ever had because it was not done by a professional. So there's that. The second thing is actually, you know what? It is what it is. This is WSDC Finals 2020. So this was my second year on Team Canada. We made the finals in 2019, and spoiler alert, we won this one. So I don't know. I think for 2020 World Schools Meet, I felt pretty decent about the round. It's not the most exciting motion in the world, so it felt a little bit like going through the motions, but so be it.
Okay, let's hear some of your speech, and you can tell us a little bit more about what was going through your head doing this. If you uh, remember, were you in the zone? Maybe. Let's see.
We're off, by the way. Great.
The abstraction inside propositions language hides the assumptions at the core of their case, that you can just opt out of consumerism. And the vagueness they give about following your passions doesn't deal at all with what this really looks like. Being a small business owner is the most all-encompassing job we can imagine. Your entire life, financial security, family, you live above your small business, is banked on your career. Being a chef means working until 2 a.m. in a line. All of the realities of proposition are not the starving artist or the wealthy artist they wanted to conjure, but things like being a social worker, a teacher, where your job follows you at home equally as much. And they don't engage at all with the economic stresses of the modern economy. You will be middle class, but being middle class means living paycheck to paycheck. It means staying up at night worrying about paying the bills. And
Okay, let's stop here. What are you feeling at this moment, and what's kind of the strategic thinking behind starting with this particular intro?
So I think at this point in the round, what we're probably trying to do is heavily win the framing battle, which is important to any debate, but the narrative is so important in WSDC in particular. Um, so I think what we're trying to do here is point out that just because you're not a lawyer or investment banker or whatever doesn't mean that your job isn't stressful. And the overall strategy seems pretty obvious, which is symmetrize, so to speak, all that stuff about stress, and then just win on making a lot of money and the benefits that flow from that. So probably what's happening here is just lots of symmetrizing, even though we're not allowed to say that word, and then trying to weigh on other things.
Okay. Any specific things that you remember about that speech?
No, I mean, the motion's kind of boring for a world's final. We felt really underwhelmed, to be honest, that they made that the final. No offense, obviously, to the motions committee and CA. It's like it is a balanced motion. Like it serves the purpose of determining the winner. But I don't know. I feel like finals of tournaments. This is a gripe that I have across a lot of debating, actually. Um, I think we should just debate kind of normal motions for finals, but not boring motions. But I don't think every final should be some hypothetical motion about like, brain in a vat or religion or like my other least favorite kind of debate, which is the fake narrative debate, which you might be familiar with, which is like it's a debate about a narrative that doesn't exist or only exists because the CAs insist it exists, and it is like a smaller narrative than the more mainstream one. So I don't know. I feel like we should have better finals motions that are more about current affairs and more interesting. That's just boring, and a lot go too far.
All right. So, what is your favorite type of motion to debate, and maybe specifically for a finals also? What's a good finals motion?
So with actually the HWS final is a good motion, even though it's hypothetical and about like taking a job. I think they didn't think enough about how the philosophical thought experiment would translate into a debate, and they should have made the info slide different to make it clear that it is actually true that if the chemist doesn't take the job, someone else will do it faster, rather than allow off to get away with like you could be they could be lying to you, that kind of stuff. I think if you do thought experiments, you have to take them to be true. I thought the finals of the Cambridge IB in the year that we were both in it was a good motion. It wasn't the first time that motion had been set, but it's good. It's interesting philosophy. I thought the Oxford IB final from that year about India, maybe not perfectly balanced, but like also a good, interesting debate because it's topical. Um, the Oxford IB final from this year, I don't love, to be honest. It was the one about Trump being the interest of the American people, and I don't know. I'm no liberal, but I don't think it's balanced, and I think the only reason it could be balanced is if only Europeans are debating it, and there's no North Americans in there to just like absolutely go crazy on the off. Um, yeah, I mean, I think philosophical debates can be good for finals, but they have to be actually deep philosophical debates rather than contrived crazy hypotheticals.
All right, fair enough. And while we're on the topic, since all of this conversation seems to fall so well, let's look at another speech of yours. This is the Cambridge Ivy 2020 Grand Finals, a debate where also me and Norman
Yeah.
participate in. It was definitely a fun competition and experience. It's the eye for an eye debate for Sharia principle. You guys can see the motion for sure. So let's hear a little bit from your speech, and then you can tell us about the story behind that tournament as well.
If we believe that the state would discern in the fair ways that CO suggests are morally necessary, then fine, CO could win. But I think CO failed to engage with the reality that the state is not doing this type of discerning between intent and action. It is judging on the basis of whether or not you were affiliated with the morality police, whether your salary is paid by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, and whether or not you are a man, whether or not that court exists in a conservative rural area that's not going to do punishment. The core issue with the CO principle is that it is a principle in theory that we could discern in potential ways that would achieve justice. But we're talking about a society that is rapidly liberalizing on the social level, but where the legal level, dominated by institutions, dominated by Sharia law itself, which is a principle that means that there's a very low likelihood of actual change. So it may well be true that the context that both closing half teams agree on about liberalizing is happening, but it is not true that that is happening in the legal system, which CO would require to actualize their principle and achieve that discerning.
Okay, so let's uh, let's stop it here. What's going through your head? Was this a tough tournament? Easy tournament? How did you get to this final? What were the vibes?
Honestly, this tournament went really well. I think we top broke. I think Naomi top spoke, I second spoke. We felt like we were debating pretty well, at least at that time, like fairly in sync. And in this final, so CO was Matt and Ahmed, and they ran some wacky principled extension. I think what I was trying to do here was just to wipe it out in the first minute and then deal with front half, which I'm pretty sure is what happens right after that. But I actually feel pretty decent about that intro. I mean, it's like cringe to watch, but I feel like it's doing what I like to do, which is try to slow down a little bit, use a little bit of style and narrative where necessary, to try to frame things out without needing to go line by line and directly refute everything, even though that's fine as well. And as I recall, what we felt like the biggest thing that we had to do was to directly refute stuff from you and Ruben, and then to show why we were different from OG, who had touched on similar lines of analysis about the way the system would function. And I feel like our extension of this round was something about the protest with Masa Amini that wasn't touched on at front half or something like that. Can't quite remember, but I don't know. I feel like what I'm doing there is what I tried to do. And I this speech is much better than the World Schools final one. What can I say? I improved.
That's great. It's a level of improvement. Are you nervous at this moment, or you're pretty chill? You're just another debate. You've been doing well.
I don't think I felt too nervous, just because we were debating well, and also because the only time when I would ever feel nerves in a whip is when I feel like I have to lie, as in the extension is derivative, or we're just trying to take a second to our opening. Like if that happens, then there's some nerves. But here, I felt like the path to victory was pretty clear, as long as it was executed on. And I actually feel like I debate better in out rounds generally, or at least up until recently, I felt like that was a trend. Maybe I got better at in rounds, but I kind of like the audience. I feel like it's nice to play off the audience, and I think people don't quite realize that you do sometimes need to change your style of debating for out rounds. Because of the strategy of you just need to take a second, accept the final, but also because I do think on some level, like, audience reaction matters. It can subconsciously influence the judges. It can affect the way that other teams feel about you and the confidence that they have in their own case. So I do think style, so to speak, can matter in finals a little bit more. And also just, it's kind of fun. Like I feel like that video went on YouTube, and it went on the Cambridge Union's YouTube, and people are going to see it. And I feel like the debating shouldn't be super technical. Like it should be accessible to an audience of people. That's one of the things that's a little frustrating about BP, is that no matter how, I mean, that was a gov whip. No matter how stylistic I make it, I'm going to be littering in the words OO and CO. And if you're just watching debate online because you're like a 13-year-old and interested in politics, you're going to have no idea what that means, even if the analysis is good. I'm a 3-on-3 fan, like Australs. I think a world where we replace BP with Australs would be perfectly fine to me.
Yeah, that's a good observation, and it's something that I wanted to ask you about directly, but you kind of answered most of it in terms of like you're one of the rare speakers nowadays that speaks slower, uh, especially compared to a lot of the top debaters. Although to be fair, it's funny because I also am one of the rare speakers that speak slow in that context. And we just watched a round where we debate against each other at a good competition. So I guess speaking slow, it's not that bad. Do you recommend it as a strategy to the average debater?
So there are two things here. The first is that if you do it as a second, you need a first in front of you who can matter dump. And it doesn't have to be like at the speed that Naomi was doing it in that round. But when I've been debating with Rena, she doesn't speak super quickly either. She speaks something somewhere in between the me on one end and that, and like she speaks at a normal speed for a modern debater. But because we both have the world schools background, we're Rena's a very good technical debater, so she's very efficient in getting content out. She doesn't waste a lot of time. She phrases things reasonably well. So I think second speaking slowly are in some sense subsidized by the first doing a good job. And if I speed up in a second, it's generally because I'm trying to fix something, and I know that I will run out of time. The other thing is that speaking slowly, the reason you're doing it is that you're good at strategy, and therefore you are good at discerning what you need to do, and you're not going to run out of time. Like, speaking fast is not evil. If you are clear when you're speaking fast, then it is often a very good strategy. And there are rounds where I will speak faster, like a IR round where you just have to do a lot of direct ref, or you have a lot of spec and you just want to dump spec because it's going to help you win, or because it's fun. So I think it's about being able to modulate your debating depending on what's going on. If you are in a final like that, or you're in a round that's close but clear and you just want to extend the margin of victory, then slowing down is good. The other thing is speaking slowly helps you to phrase things more precisely. I think one of the frustrating things about fast talkers isn't that fast is bad. Like I can track, if I'm judging, I can track fast speaking, no problem. I could track, way faster than, Matt Cato and Naomi if I had to. It's just that it's not very pleasant to listen to. And it's also that the faster you go, the more random filler words you're using, the less precise your language is, the less engaging your speech is, just because it's hard to think fast enough to come up with the right words. So it's not just that you stutter and use ums and ahs, but it's also just the word choice isn't as good and isn't as precise. And I think that can impose, especially on speakers that don't have top level, best in the world analytical abilities, that can impose a bit of a cap on your speak. So you're debating, because you're just never going to reach the level of precision that you would require to deliver very compelling analysis and get high speak. So I think people shouldn't settle in to very fast talking before they realize what their strengths are. And that takes time. And then you can figure out which strategy you want to approach. I really do think that the really slowing down, like to a really slow pace in the modern debating meta, is easier for a second to do than a first as well.
Yeah, that's probably true. That's probably true. You need to put a lot of things out there to make it stick, regardless of the strategy. Honestly, like obviously one of the strategies that I would say a lot of time, like Naomi or Matt will do, is to put a lot of things. But even when me and Rumen are speaking, it's similar to the extent in which it's one or two big things, but we still do a lot of analysis into those areas. So it ends up sort of like the need of Rumen to speak fast, and he doesn't speak that fast, but he definitely speaks faster than average. And it kind of works a way around of like it enables us as second speakers to do a little bit more of the narratives, creating them and doing the good examples. Something that I'm gonna mention in a second. But before that, quick question: who is the better fast speaker, Naomi or Matt Cato?
Naomi.
Why?
Because her record on paper is very slightly better. And because I think that the depth of analysis that she gets to is just slightly higher. I think they're both excellent. I think that Matt is probably slightly better at framing things in a real world compelling way. But I don't know. I've seen them both debate a lot. I think that they're extremely close. You could flip a coin, but I do think Naomi's like top end talent is a little bit higher.
That's fair enough, and a lot of people would like to debate these conversations and compare the two. I think there are some similarities for sure, which are obvious. So Naomi is definitely somebody who I think, especially over time, is gonna remain in the conversation of like definitely one of the greatest women of all time in debating. Definitely one of the greatest of all time, especially in terms of like record and stuff like that. So I think we've already talked on the podcast that inevitably, when you have such a strong four speaker and you're speaking with them, you kind of remain in the shadow, especially for the naked eye, if I can tell it like that. So, was that how was that experience speaking with Naomi, especially in the context of like everybody knew who Naomi is, some people didn't know about you, and they were always maybe even surprised in some senses when you got out and you did a great speech and saved the round. I've seen a couple of those for sure.
Yeah, so I think that deserves a bit of context on how this happened in the first place, which is that I debated in first year, so novice year, with Rena, and not that much. Like I did some tournaments, I did Central Novice, I did VP Champs with Matt Farrell, and then we did Yale IV and Hard Times. So yeah, I think that might have been all. There might have been one more. So I didn't debate a ton, and then I kind of stopped speaking over that summer of 2021 because I was very focused on coaching debating, and honestly, I'm still mostly focused on coaching debating. Like that's always been the focus for me. But like as in on world schools and high schoolers. But Naomi needed a partner in the fall of when I was in second year, so I think that was 2021. And so a week before the online Cambridge IB of that year, she messaged me and asked, "Will you do it?" And I thought about it for a bit, and I was like, let's just do it. And then we did really well. We made the final, and I think we broke pretty high, and we both got top 10 speaks. And I hadn't debated in quite a while, so I was like, okay, clearly I'm not that rusty. I think because I was coaching a lot of debate, and it's like with these like really smart, crazy good Canadian high schoolers, I was still keeping I was still thinking about motions a lot. I just wasn't speaking. And so like I think, my speaks were not awesome. I think Naomi was maybe only 4 or 5 total speaker points ahead of me, but like she was better. Like there was I was just rusty. And so after that, she also talks me into doing the Oxford IB the next weekend, also online. And we do it, and we also make the final. And I don't know, I think we were robbed in that final, to be honest, to be fully honest. But we did very well, and I think my speaks improved too. So this went very well. Obviously, I was still pretty unknown. I mean, a lot of people in the circuit did know me though because of World Schools. Like a lot, the circuits are fairly integrated. A lot of university judges did World Schools, and I had the CV of like winning World Schools. So it's not like I'm some random nobody. That's not a fair characterization. Like it's like the least compelling underdog story you've ever heard. So I'll acknowledge that. But
That's fair enough.
certainly, yeah, like certainly to a lot of people in the uni circuit who didn't know World Schools, I was fairly unknown. And then and then we won the round robin that year too. So I feel like I became known at that point, at the very least, if I wasn't previously. And then I feel like I did my best actual debating with Naomi in the run up to Madrid. So I guess we did Belgrade Worlds online. I think my best speaks at Worlds were that year. I was like tied for 4th speaker or something like that. So I must have been known by then because like Naomi was barely outspeaking me. But obviously, like in terms of discussion, maybe I was less known. That's it. And also, I was just less socially integrated into the circuit. Right, this was kind of the online era. I was in Canada, Naomi was in Europe. I wasn't very engaged in the debating community, to be honest. Obviously, I could have made more of an effort to do that, but I didn't. And then in the next year, we do the Oxford and Cambridge IVs, and those are in person. I get to know people a bit more, and we do very well. So I never felt like I was not getting my due on some deep, resentful level. I think obviously like a lot of my contributions to the team were coming in prep too, because I just know a lot of examples and I was generating arguments, and that's not observable. So I think maybe the assumption was like all the cases is coming out of Naomi's speech, and so it's hers, but it's not. In a lot of rounds, it was actually like 50-50, or even I was generating more of the case in some rounds. So there was that going on too. But I felt like I was getting my due. And obviously at Madrid Worlds, we just did terribly, utterly terribly. Like worst to debate. I mean, objectively, we made the quarters and lost on a split, but our in rounds were bad, our speaks were bad. So, it's hard to take away too much from that. But I don't know, I've done fairly well for myself this year with Worlds in the round robin. And that's obviously been with Rena. So I feel like I don't resent getting the short end of the stick or anything like that. That's not reasonable. And I think sometimes it actually does. If you are in a debating partnership like that with such a really strong speaker, it actually does take debating on your own to become established. So fair enough.
Okay, you've mentioned a lot of what I was about to ask you. So let's watch a round that I handpicked myself because I loved your speech in that round. And I actually think that not that Naomi was bad at that round, but I think you definitely brought it home. And without a lot of the, what I would like to say, good debates coming that you did in that round, I don't think that you pull it off. And it's a fairly competitive room. So let's show it to everybody, and we can talk a little bit about the context. So this is the Madrid Round Six. We're in OG. Have HWS in O, a good Sydney team in CG, and you guys are CO. Obviously, you guys win the room, and I think the motion is, or it's this, it's like developing countries, whether they want a change of power from dominant political parties. And I guess from my perspective, and you can add on to that context, me and Roman do a like pretty good OG. We set up the debate in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
and it's a strong setup. I think one of our better OGs, since I don't think OGs definitely are best position. Um, and I think Naomi does a lot of things in extension, but it's kind of a bit all over the place. So I guess tell us the setup from your perspective. How were you? What was in your head when this debate was happening, and what were you trying to do with your speech? And we can hear a little bit of it after that.
Yeah, I think in this round we just had a bunch of extensions because we each generated maybe 2 or 3 extensions in prep, and we probably didn't triage quite enough what would get run. So everything or almost everything comes out of Naomi's speech, which is a very good speech. And I think the judge here was Harish, which meant that the fact that it was uh, like matter dumpy and all over the place didn't matter because the content was good. So I think in reality, I probably didn't save this round because we were fine no matter what. But I think with that, if it had been any other judge, there's a chance that would be more true. And I think what I was trying to do was just to focus in on a set of extensions that I liked. I think maybe one or two of the choices was wrong, and I should have. I think I recall thinking that I should have emphasized one of the others instead a bit more. But I was just trying to frame why the extensions matter and position them against you guys.
Yeah, and so to be precise, you're absolutely correct in terms of the fact that if I remember correctly, the wing split against you guys for us. So
Yeah.
definitely there needed to be some work there in terms of making it all work, uh, regardless of the content itself. So let's hear a little bit of it and we can talk about it. Where just see, let's just do the start maybe. I think that will be good. Oops. Yeah.
This is important for 2 reasons. Number one, speech. I like to clip on the point of the speaker to the opposition.
There we go.
Yeah.
When it was revealed that the South African president, Cyril Ramaphosa, was essentially stuffing money under his mattress, the South African rand dropped 40% overnight. This is important for 2 reasons. Number one, it proves that there are mechanisms of accountability that people think are real, even in probably the example in this debate that is the most severe for our side, where they've been in power since the 1990s and have massive levels of control. But markets, economic consultants, everyone thought there was such a risk of them losing in the next election when Ramaphosa was revealed to be corrupt that they immediately pulled their money out of the rand. This proves the second thing, that investors really care about loss and stability. They will immediately pull money out of economies. They'll immediately write down investments because they are very, very afraid. I'm going to first talk about to what extent accountability even matters, because I think both Gov teams imply that bad things happen when you lose hope, or bad things happen when accountability is lost, but they never prove those things. Then I'm going to talk about radicalism and why it's likely to be the general place of leaders that exists, and then I'm going to weigh over opening opposition. The first thing to talk about is to what extent accountability even matters in the first place. Now, I'll deal with the alleged tension from opening government here first, which is there are historical traumas that exist that we apparently think go away. To be very clear, we think that dominant parties are good at keeping tensions, which are still very salient to people, under the rug, because you prioritize other things. You prioritize your patronage networks, getting rich in the regime, or whatever. But there is a spark created by their policy, which is an election being changed, that reactivates those things because there are now political incentives to reactivate those narratives.
Okay, this is the thing that I really like about this page. Obviously, like the intro is very good. It's kind of showcases, hey, this instability thing can literally uh, destroy the country. But I think that like the use of words in this case and like uh, explaining how this can, for now the tensions have been not so strong, and then this can be a spark that reignites a lot of the conflict, which I think was like the missing piece between proving essentially why um, the tensions wouldn't have risen anyway, which is kind of like a big gist of our case. And I just remember being in that round and being like, this might definitely be something. And when I rewatched it, I feel like this is a moment where you establish really well, okay, I need to create the narrative of like, if in fact there are no tensions and now I want to prove that there are tensions, I need to kind of set up the debate of like, how would that look like, and you identify this particular problem with both governments, and it works well in your favor. Obviously not the only reason that you win, but it's a pivotal moment in the debate for me. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I think one of the things I'm very concerned with in seconds is the narrative battle in the round, especially if other teams call out tensions or say that, the facts that we're using aren't relevant. I'm very concerned about that because a lot of the case can be reliant on a couple of core illustrations. And I think what I'm trying to do here is to just use the way that I'm phrasing this to make it seem absurd that there could be a tension in the case or anything like that, rather than addressing it mechanically. Because I think if I were to address it mechanically and say like, um, this is why there's not a tension in the case, and then just go through it, I don't think it would be sold as well as Gov is just utterly ridiculous and even trying this. So I think part of that is style serving the analysis. But I also think the other thing I'm trying to do is just sprinkle in examples and illustrations that show why it's actually our mechanisms that are leading to real change in the world rather than some other factor. Because I think in a lot of debating, a big rest strategy that's used by all teams and can work is just like, you are implying that an example happens for this reason, but there are all these other factors which also affect this. So how can this be the tipping point? And so I was trying to be as attentive as possible to proving the tipping point, and avoiding that accusation of like, okay, but there are all these other factors that lead to some impact that you're also claiming actually happening.
So you're not nervous in that round, you're in a good place again.
Well, I think we weren't doing so hot at this Worlds going into this round, and I think we were probably happy to see the draw because we liked the motion. We felt Seal was a good position, but I definitely felt some pressure to right the ship here and like try to get us some higher speaks and get back up there and just to bank points, because we were just like A, not debating well, and then B, probably getting some weird split calls, which were definitely wrong, but we were allowing them to happen by not being as clean and perfect as you have to be. So I felt some pressure. I wouldn't describe it as nerves, but I knew it was a very important round.
So let's talk about that worlds. From what you already set up, um, you're doing very well. Before that, you've had like Belgrade, so you it's not your first rodeo, for sure. Um, so what was that whole experience like? And we can talk about it, how it ended, again for that.
Yeah. I just don't think we debated that well through most of the rounds. This was a good one. We had another good one in round 9. We were just not on the same page in a lot of rounds. For whatever reason, we weren't generating content as well as we normally do it. And that's very tricky because when you're a team that's reliant on winning by generating a lot of content and then it's just not happening, then you lose your comparative advantage and then you have to pivot. We also we just feel like there were a couple of rounds where we got exactly the wrong judge against exactly the wrong team. So that stuff happens, and it's possible that generally that irons itself out over time, but it doesn't always iron itself out over 9 rounds. So there was that going on too. And then in the quarters, we just got not only did we not break as high as we wanted to, but we just got this break path of death, where we had to drop TCDA in the octo just to have the honor of debating. Sorry, we didn't drop the octo. We had to drop Zagreb in the octo just to have the honor of debating TCDA, Isaac and XK, and Sydney A in the quarter. And so 2 teams had to go home. And Sydney went through on a 5-0, and then we dropped to Isaac and XK on a 3-2 split, which was too bad because it was close. And Ashish split for us, so there's something. But whatever, close split. If we had gone through that round, who knows what would have happened? It wouldn't have changed the fact that even if we had won that world, the speak still would have been bad, and like the still wouldn't have broken high. But we probably wouldn't have cared that much. But it's just too bad.
So how do you are you frustrated at that point? What's going through your head, and how do you deal with the feelings?
I was fine. I wasn't banking that much on winning worlds. I was at that point. I was like, this is important. It'd be fine if it happened. But I felt fine the next day. We went to the art museum. We just kind of hung out. Um, I mean, I think it's just debating is very important to me, but there are other things that are important to me too. And I know that worlds in particular is I think especially past the quarterfinal for whatever reason can be very random. It's not that teams who win don't deserve it, and it's not that on that particular day the teams that go through aren't debating better. They generally are. But there's so much parity, right? Especially now. I think people need to rethink how they think as well about what it means to be a really good debating team, because I think debating used to be a lot more stratified. Like what I heard from Dinos was at Worlds in 2015 or 2016, like the good teams would just demolish everyone, and there were so many teams that had no chance. Whereas there's so many teams in the like middle to high range that can totally take points away from the top teams, and people go crazy and are like, "Oh my god, like the best team in the world just lost to like some middle good team." And it's like, okay, yeah, but 9 times out of 10 that won't happen, and that's what makes a really good team good, is that they're consistent, and that it's not that when they lose it's some fluke. They lose, like it's a subjective activity, and sometimes also left spec on a thing or whatever. But I think people get a little too obsessed with like, oh, this team beat this really good team, so they are transitively better than them and better than all the other teams that good team has beaten. But that's not how it works. It's a game of probabilities. And yeah, like being good is about consistency. We weren't consistent at that tournament. That's what did us in. We had peaks and valleys, and our valleys came at the exact wrong time.
So moving on to the most recent worlds, you debated again. Tell us a little bit about. So first of all, like what goes into the decision to do it again? Why did you switch partners, and how was the whole journey?
Yeah, so I wanted to go with Rena for fun. Me and Rena are very good friends. We would be good friends outside of debating anyway. And she was on Team Canada with me as well. Very good debater first. So really like at Madrid, I cared about winning. I was just fine when we didn't. But at Madrid, I really didn't care at all. Like I was doing it for fun because it would be fun to get funding to go to Vietnam. And shout out to the McGill Debating Union. They're very generous. So like the A team is fully funded for Worlds. So it's like, okay, this is a free trip, and my friends are there. So I decided to do it. We did some prep. We didn't do a ton of prep. We did Oxford IB, which didn't go so well. Yale IB, which went reasonably well. But we weren't like we didn't really spar or anything like that. We were just doing some tournaments, going to Worlds, and seeing what would happen. And I knew that we had a good shot, not necessarily of winning, but just of doing well. And we did end up debating quite well at Worlds. Aside from that one round, which I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. No, it's not fun to know after round two. It's like, okay, I'm not top speaking. Done with that, but we can move on. So we had one round where we were bad. Not 75 bad, more like 78 or 79 bad probably, but I don't know, Room was having a bad day. So the whole round just gets like XK gets a 77, Isaac gets a 76, I get a 75. We're gonna get to 74. It's crazy. Anyway, so that happens, but otherwise we debate quite well, especially after that round. Like I think we averaged above 80, like closer to 84, at least I did after that round. So I recovered it. And we broke pretty high. Like we broke fourth, which is higher than I had broken either of the 2 years with Naomi. So that part went well. And then we just messed up in the quarter. It's funny because for whatever reason it was the quarters that did me in 3 times, and it's like you're delusional for thinking you're better than a World's quarterfinalist when you lose quarters 3 times. But I don't know. Could have not lost the quarters one of those 3 times. I think. Honestly, we did it like it was a fair call. We did it to ourselves by just messing up and debating really poorly in the quarter. There's not much more to it. We lost to good teams, but teams that we should beat. And whatever happens. I wasn't again too worked up about it. The point was to go and have fun. We had fun. Doing any better would have been a bonus on top of that. But I was happy with how we broke and reasonably good speaks. So fine with that.
I think just for context, the statistical anomaly was you in the same tournament in the matter of a few rounds, or was it
two
right
rounds?
next to
Rumen gave me a 75 and then 85. And I think the actual difference between those speeches was not very large, to be honest.
Interesting. So how did you scam Roman for an 85? What was do you remember what was different about it now that you
Okay,
looked
so
it up?
obviously the speech that I got an 85 was better than the one that got a 75. Apparently he told people that we debated like Bulgarians, and I was like, okay, good to know. I don't know quite what that means, but it means something certainly. I don't know. We just refuted more directly. We're a bit more structural, more confident because we knew what we were doing rather than kind of flailing around in the previous round. So was this a speech that was 10 points better than the first one? No, in the sense that the first one was not a 75, and the second one was maybe more like an 83 or an 84 than an 85, probably. Maybe in the back of his head, he was compensating. Never know. But we definitely just debated better in that round, and he just so happened to see probably our worst round and one of our better rounds.
All right, that's fair. Any other highlight from Vietnam Worlds in general?
I thought the socials were fun. I like seeing people. We were in one of the bad hotels, the Vien Dong, which is just like wasn't like dirty or anything, but like the walls were all super thin and the rooms were tiny. So that part was great. But it was nice to see people and just hang out. And actually, I went to this bar with XK on the day after. So unfortunately, we did drop XK in the Octos, and then we dropped after dropping them. So we went to this bar that I found called the Loser Bar, which is like it has all these graphics that just say like loser with like hearts. It was very strange, but we went there and that was funny. So it was just nice. It was nice. Yeah, that's oh my god. There you go. How did you know? That's it. So I did go there with XK. That was fun. It was nice to go to Vietnam, and I did. I went to Taipei after, and then to Tokyo. So I got some travel in because I had just graduated. So all that was so fun.
Yeah, that's one of the two pictures that I wanted to show and get your reaction, but you kind of did it before. Um, like behind the debastagram, if we can say it like that. I looked for a few pictures online, and this was definitely the one that seemed the most interesting to me. Um, so I guess my question here is, you seem to be dealing pretty well with like losing it and not really overthinking stuff. Is this just on the surface? Is have there been moments of doubt, low moments throughout the whole debate journey, or you just kind of always were above it, especially entering BP as a world schools champion? What do you think?
Yeah. I don't think I ever felt like I had a ton to prove. Like it always felt to me like uni debating was kind of a bonus, and I was doing it for fun. Once you're in and you devoted so much time, there's I mean, I was pretty, it wasn't like, breaking down upset, but I was not happy after Madrid because we could have done better. And it's no matter whether you're doing it for fun or not, you're spending a lot of time on it. You're in Madrid, like the physical reality is that you are devoting yourself to it. So that part doesn't go away. Um, but no, I don't think there's ever been a point where I've been super down. Um, I don't like. I will debate a little bit next year. I am not planning on speaking at this next Worlds. That's mostly just to focus on first year of law. But I'm going to do the Oxford IB. Um, I have a partner lined up. I won't. I think we're set. So we'll do that. And then I'll probably do a couple of tournaments for fun, like LSE Open. But I think the goal at this point is mostly to focus on academics. There's definitely a chance that I will consider doing Sophia Worlds in 2026 because I do have one left. But that depends on so many factors, like a partner coming along and whether I can scam someone to coming to Cambridge just to do Worlds with me. Never know. So we'll see.
If you could do it with anybody uh, ever in the history of debating, who would it be?
Okay, I have two answers. So one is the pragmatic answer, which is that I feel me and Rena worked together very well and had a lot of fun debating in Vietnam. So I would totally do it with Rena. Again, I was joking with her that she should enroll. So she's an accountant. She's starting out as an accountant, and there's a second university in Cambridge called Anglia Ruskin University, which offers an accounting master's, and you are eligible to be part of the Cambridge Union if you go to this university. So I was joking with her that she should do her master's in accounting there, and then we do Panama World, but that's not happening. So aside from that, I mean, this just gets into the who is the greatest of all time conversation, which we can get into. But in terms of who I think would actually be compatible with what I do, having seen Ashish's debating at the round robin, I think Ashish, because can do the first very well, probably agrees with me on what's persuasive and what matters. If I were concerned with someone who could do really good, really deep analysis, then obviously Dan Lahav. So there's your two answers. And those also so happen to be the two best debaters that I think of all time, in my view. So boring answer.
Would you speak first for Dan Lahav?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think that transition will be fun for you?
Yeah, I mean, I spoke first at the LSE Open, and I was a bit rusty from not having done it since grade 10 or 11, but I feel like I was doing well. For whatever reason, I just wasn't getting as high speaks doing first because I think I'm just not used to how people like to structure them and so on. But the actual content that was coming out was very good. Like me and SK made the finals, and I don't know, they felt like I was debating very well in first. So I'd have no problem with it. I like when I have spoken first, in first year in university, I did it a little bit, and in high school, I did it a little bit. Like I used to actually just be a first, through most of high school, so I'd have no problem with it.
Okay. So The goals are Ashish or Dan. If you had to pick one,
It would be easier to pick Ashish because Ashish is more comfortable with the speaker order, and I wouldn't have to change speaking positions,
okay, fair
which is
enough.
such a cop out answer. But there you go.
All right.
No, I mean, okay. So if you had to ask me who I think the actual greatest of all time is in a vacuum, I think it is Dan.
Why?
I just think the creativity of the analysis and the depth of the analysis is so good, and it's paired with a delivery that you don't normally see from that kind of speaker who's so analytically deep, but also sells it in his own way. Like it's not. I think people have a misconception when they talk about style in debating that style's about like emotiveness and like the poor single mother and so on. It's not. Like I try to tell this to the world school students that I coach a lot that like style is about being compelling and confident in your delivery and phrasing things well. It's not about being emotive. And Dan didn't have to be emotive. He just delivered stuff in a way that sounds smart. And I think that's the best thing you could do.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And when I think about very powerful moments in debating, it's not that somebody was shouting or doing anything imprecise, but rather it was a really smart way to say something, you know,
Yeah.
or just a very powerful idea that made things so much clearer. So it's
Yeah,
really
absolutely.
it's really still about content in a sense. It's still about what you are saying rather than how you're saying things, even if that is not the first thing that you think about when we say style in debating.
No, I totally agree. And like there are other people on that list of really, really good debaters too that I would be very happy to debate with. But I think when I think about the two best on like raw talent, it's those guys.
Overrated debaters. Will the Canadian spill some blood here, or
I'll do it. Okay. Rumen. Um,
all right?
in relation to you, first of all. So solidarity. And again, not because Rumen's not an incredible debater. He actually is. I just think it's you guys do a good job here at building the rep machine. And like I think the reality is that you and Rumen had a great run at Madrid Worlds and like the 90 and all that. And I think that attracted a ton of attention. And he's also doing a lot of great service for the debating community with the YouTube channel and so on. So like whether you are like overrated doesn't imply that you are illegit like that you are becoming overrated via some illegitimate conspiracy. It can just be the natural result of the attention on you. And I think, believe it or not, another answer, and I know he would tell you this himself because we had this conversation. Tejas is another great example of like he is an incredible debater, but just like the amount of rating is somehow still above that, just based on WFDC and like speaks being really high. And it it feels crazy to say that because both Rumen and Tejas are so good. It just manages to go above and beyond that. Um, there's two other categories. So, actually, there's one. A lot of the overrating that happens in debating is subtler forms of overrating that tend to happen to like ex-world schoolies before they have proven themselves in university, or like initially do well. And I think people get very obsessed with like schoolies coming in being automatically good. And the reality of the transition is it's very hard. Like I had to change my debating. I had to really think about how BP works. And I think also because sometimes having done world schools will result in you getting higher speaks than your team result or outram results will indicate. Or just struggling in certain kinds of motions, or specifically you begin to struggle against teams that are way stronger than you, even though you're really good at beating up on weaker teams. So I think that there's a category of overrating that the community does. The reality, though, is that a lot of, even the majority of world schoolies who debate become pretty good. It's just that it's premature, the rating.
Yeah, that makes sense. I agree with the sentiment about it. That you can't be overrated unless you're rated in some capacity.
Yeah.
So by necessity, it means that the people who we might deem overrated are pretty good debaters. It's kind of kind of the point to it. So okay, good answer, and I expected more of a cop out, so I have to give it to you here. You did the work. You did the work. Good job. Okay. Another picture that I want you to react to, and we can kind of tie into the next question. So let me share my screen for a second. I
Terrifying.
think I think it's a interesting picture for sure.
That's a good one. Oh my god, that's good. That's from 2018, I think June or April of 2018, and this is Team Canada training camp. So at this point, Naomi's a year older than me. She was on Team Canada in 2018. This is training camp in 2018 for Team Canada 2019. And that is us in the like weird lobby of some airport hotel in the Greater Toronto area, in our Team Canada outfit because we're supposed to take a photo, but the photo's horrible because it's in a hotel lobby with no lighting. So that's the photo. That's what it's from. And obviously, yeah, like there was a year on Team Canada where me and Naomi intersected, which was 2019, the year that we made the finals. And like because we both were very opinionated and had a lot of ideas and content, the way that the prep, because World Schools, it's a five person prep, so there were always motions where either one of me or Naomi would have very different takes on what's persuasive and what's important, and the prep would kind of devolve into us fighting over our conception of the round. So that was fun, and we had to have, like, Jason, who was our coach, had to have all these strategies for ways that they would like pick and choose whose concept was going to be used in a given round. It ended up working pretty well. Like we made the finals, and this was a rebuild year. Like Naomi was the only returner from the previous year's team, and we did a lot better than the previous team. So it went very well. But there was a lot we had to iron out in terms of the like teamwork and finding ways to fit ideas together in prep.
What is it about World Schools that you prefer to BP, especially talking to a lot of the audience may never even done World Schools or any type of form of 3v3. So, what's the magic behind it?
So, I mean, my ideal debating would be Australs rather than World Schools, because the thing with World Schools is there's some stupid traditional rules about running a third argument and like the case line and like the judging and what it looks for. So forget all the things that are particular to World Schools. Let's just talk about the format in the abstract of 3 versus 3, whether there's a reply or not, versus BP. I think one thing with BP is that it encourages lying, specifically from closing half. Closing half is built often. Like whenever someone is derivative, that almost always necessarily means that at some point in the round they have told a lie about what is new, especially given the rise of direct weighing against front half. The second thing that I think is broken about BP is we have no clear rules for what is a knife versus weighing or refuting-ish against your top half. And I think who can get away with it is often just built on how good their analysis is and or their rep. And judges have very different willingness to accept weighing that is essentially ref against your front half. And I don't think there's a good way to resolve that question. I'm actually sort of on some level sympathetic to this whole, like, we should just allow knifing thing, because I think that's the direction BP is going. But my take on that is like, that is a fundamental problem with BP that should cause us to interrogate BP more as a format. There are certain basic efficiencies to BP that are good. So one of them is that it compares more teams against each other through the course of a tournament, and therefore might be more likely to lead to more accurate break results and rankings. And it's also very efficient on a judge level because you're putting 8 people into a room rather than 6. Although World Schools obviously has 5. But I know, like, when we run high school tournaments to raise money at McGill, like, we prefer BP because you can, as compared to doing CNDF or like Canadian Parliamentary, just cost efficient for judges and versus rooms. So I think that the depth of the analysis in 3v3 gets higher because you're encouraged to focus on a smaller number of claims and carry a core narrative through and really get into the weeds on those arguments, more than being concerned about having to turf burn your closing or about having to lie to show why something that's obviously less important than what opening proves but might be more certain or have more truth on the margin. Because I think what ends up happening is that closing wins on a claim that is, by any objective measure, less important, but larger margin. And that can be weird too, because the debate gets divorced from what a reasonable member of the public would think about when they think about what is the core trade-off in this topic.
I think that we should be talking about these things, and 3v3 is definitely an interesting format that I unfortunately was not able to be an active member of, because like during my time there is no way that, even today it's pretty hard to send a Bulgarian team to WSDC, and it's hard to like do the circuit thing. So one thing I would say about BP that has nothing to do with the actual format, but it's a great plus, is that just the community itself is much more accessible. You have many more
Yeah.
tournaments, and a lot of people who don't have backing of institutions and so on can actually do it. So if we can marry these two things in a way, I think that that will be very interesting. And from the little activity that I've done, it could be actually very fun. So that's
Yeah, I think if you took all the resources and tournaments that are BP and snapped your fingers and made them 3-on-3, you'd solve almost all those problems.
it's definitely good thought experiment to have. And I don't know, I'll try to do a 3v3 tournament one of these days, even if I'm the old head at it. I think it will be definitely interesting. Oh, look, Max, this has been really fun. We've got to see some interesting stuff. Um, at the end of these conversations, what I'd like to do is like give back the platform. So you can ask me a question, you can make a statement, you can tell something to the audience. Um, the floor is yours.
Okay. I don't have too much to say, but what I would say is like North American debating is pretty good right now. We saw it at Nautic. I went to Mexico in like Mexico for Nautic. It was hosted by the Mexican Debate Association. They did an incredible job. So shout out to Manuel and Benjamin for running that, and to the whole CA team and the OrgCom. I thought the HWS round robin was run very well by Denny Schoening and the whole HWS team. And I would not be surprised if at Panama Worlds, like North American, and I mean both American and Canadian teams, do pretty well. We always have this problem in Canada with brain drain, where like our best world schoolies go abroad for university, and I'm doing that next, so fair enough. But the Canadian circuit is reasonably good. There's not a ton of like top end talent in it, but there's a lot of smart people. And I think if people took North America a bit more seriously in debating, that would probably be good. Not that there's anything suspicious or nefarious to it. The European circuit's just very big. There's a lot of tournaments. And I think if you actually look at the high-end level, at the best teams in the world right now, I would not be surprised if at this next Worlds, a lot of them are North American. So not that anyone's being disrespected or anything, but I just think it deserves a little bit more attention, maybe. That's all I got to say.
Well, you heard this from the source. Put some respect on the uh, American debating community. Um, thank you, Max, for being a guest on the show. I wish you lots of luck with your degree and litigation, and living this crazy little life that we are living. See you somewhere, sometime in the future.
I'll see you in Europe in fall. Very
Let's
likely.
go.
All right. Thanks for having me.